All right. Well, there's a couple of things that when Eric asked me to do this, with it being a mix of coaches and players, and some of the things that I've been working on in the last sort of 12 months, I figured might be some useful insight in for both sides. So obviously, talk to you a little bit about how I got to where I have, how I feel. I create the working environment for the players that I currently work with. And then one of the biggest things for me that I think about the most when I think about what's important for a player is understanding the game. I'll show you show you a little presentation on that, and then for not only the coaches but the players, I thought this was be quite interesting for you to see. I've started in the last sort of 12 months, 18 months working with a sports psychologist, a lot on messaging and diving into that side of the game. Which I think is more important than maybe sometimes some of the technical and the tactical stuff. And I think when you think of that save that Jan Sommer made, that everyone's talked about, the mindset and the mentality as well to want to keep the ball out of the goal in that moment and staying calm in a moment where it's chaos. He slips, he's got to scramble. I think is just as important. And then, as you saw a little bit, I try and show you again, just to wrap up, sort of how I then try and bring that all into a working week as we prepare for a game. Okay, so looking a little bit at how I work, three things I think for me are the most important. I always go back to the game, the environment that I want to create. Oops. And then what it looks like in training. These three things are paramount for me when I think about what I want to do and how I want to go about doing it. Because then obviously you've got both sides of the ball, the out of possession, and there's lots of ways you can frame all this. But I think for me, fundamentally, going back to the game and then the environment, that's going to be paramount to be able to bring out effective training sessions, whether it's in possession or out of possession. And then the one thing I wanted to just touch on and show a little bit of a presentation that I've done with my goalkeepers in the past is just, this probably for me is one of the most important things I think of. When I think of an elite player, whether it's a goalkeeper or outfield player, is this part, is understanding the game. It's one of the things that I always go back to the most. And I'll jump out of this real quick and I'll show a quick presentation. Yeah, everyone see that okay?
We've got a blue screen pre-season.
Perfect. Pre-season. Perfect. Okay. So I talk a lot to the goalkeepers about this. How do we train? What does the game look like? And I think a lot of you can attest to this. It's not what you ever want it to be. It can get really uncomfortable. There's always chaos involved, and it's very unpredictable. So then these are the three things I think about when I'm designing training sessions. What the goalkeeper needs versus what he wants. And obviously working with first team players, this is a little bit different, potentially than working with younger players. But obviously understanding where they're coming from is obviously really important. If I don't have that relationship, then they're the ones that have to go out and play. So it's important for me to recognise what maybe they feel they need to be ready for the weekend versus me just basically trying to joystick them. And then the other two things I think about, how the team plays. I think this can get missed by a lot of people sometimes because you get so caught up in how the opponent attacks. But ultimately, your team's got a game model and it's got a style, and the opponent is going to find ways to exploit that. So training those things and training the potential breakdowns of how you're going to give up chances due to the way that your team plays is, I think, is really important as well. And then the last part I've always talked about for me with my goalkeepers is I want them to be able to solve problems. So if I want them to be able to solve problems, I need to consistently put them in situations where they have to think. again, thinking about game understanding, are they able to see how things develop? What is actually happening in front of them, and then picking up the relevant information to then make good decisions. And then something I talk a lot about as well with them is removing what you don't need, especially when you think about the unpredictable and chaotic nature of the game from the goalkeeper's perspective. Sometimes we can get caught up in, oh, well, it could be this, and it could be this, and it could be this. And that's where you think about those lines as well, where I do use those in training again, where I can say, well, is that really going to happen here? Yes, it could, but probably not. So we can start to narrow down thoughts and ideas so that we can start to take up the right positions and be ready to deal with the right actions.
Excellent.
So with this in mind, no situation's ever the same, but there's a lot of similarities. And then using, obviously, I talk to our goalkeeper now, Christian, a lot about this. Experience is nothing if you don't use it. So it's important to always lean back on what works and what doesn't work. So I'll look at a few clips here and just look at what potentially could be situations. So look first here, defending the goal. Transition moment. Think about this from this standpoint. What's happening at the moment? What could happen? Oh, sorry about that, 1 second. Let me take that sound off. That's not going to be enjoyable. So you've got a shooting window. So positionally, tactically, you can start to adjust from there. There's also an opportunity for a pass. But positionally, you have to take up what is going to be the most important part in this from this picture would be obviously first and foremost, you've got to defend the goal.